Hare Krishna. Please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. So, today we will start a discussion on the 13th chapter of the Bhagavad-gita. The chapter is titled Nature, Enjoyer and Consciousness. It is also known as Kshetra Kshetragya Vibhav Yoga. So this represents the beginning of the third set of 6 chapters in the Bhagavad-gita. And earlier on we had discussed how the Bhagavad-gita is thematically distributed into 3 sections. In the first 6 chapters, the first section, Krishna tells us about ourselves. It tells us about our body, our soul, the relationship between the body and soul, how to understand, perceive the soul to the path of karma and jnana and astanga. In the middle 6 sections, Krishna talks about himself, his position as the personality of Godhead, his opulences, how he can be seen in matter, how matter can be seen in him. And then he ended up by glorifying the position of a devotee and the process of devotional service. So we had mentioned how this was actually all that Krishna wants us to know. And the last 6 chapters are details. Specifically, they are details with respect to the obstacles that the jiva experiences in realizing its own self as a soul, and also in realizing its position as a devotee of Krishna. So, if you look at the end of the 12th chapter, it does not seem to flow smoothly into the 13th chapter. Generally, we see that at the end of every chapter, Krishna lays the seed of the next chapter, or he inspires Arjuna to ask a question, which then becomes the basis of the next chapter. But he ends the 12th chapter glorifying the position of a devotee. And then the 13th chapter begins with Arjuna asking what seems to be unrelated questions. But in the bigger scheme of things, one can understand that Arjuna, after hearing about his own identity as a soul, after understanding Krishna's position as the Supreme Lord and the soul's position to serve the Lord, is now curious as to why doesn't everybody just take to it? If we are all the soul and not the body, if Krishna is the Lord, why doesn't everybody just simply engage in the process of bhakti? What are the obstacles to it? And that forms the basis of the 13th chapter and actually the last 6 chapters of the Bhagavad-gita. So we will start with the first 2 verses. Arjun vacha prakritim purusham cheva kshetram kshetragyam evacha etad veditam ichchami jnanam geyam ch keshava. Sri Bhagavan vacha idam shariram kaunteya kshetram itra abhidiyate etadyo vetitam prabhu kshetrakya iti tadvidah. Arjuna said, "O my dear Krishna, I wish to know about Prakriti, nature, Purusha, the enjoyer, and the field, and the knower of the field, and of knowledge and the object of knowledge." The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "This body, O son of Kunti, is called the field, and one who knows this body is called the knower of the field." So, in the first verse, we see that Arjuna has asked Krishna 6 questions. So, this table here has the list of the 6 questions that are asked by Arjun. That what is Kshetra? What is the field of activities? What is Kshetragya? Who is the knower of the field? Then what is knowledge? Jnanam. What is the object of knowledge? Gyam. Who is the enjoyer? Purusha. And what are the modes of material nature? Prakriti. So essentially the rest of the 33 verses in this chapter are devoted to Krishna's answer of these 6 questions. So of these 6 questions, Krishna in the second verse, he right away answers 2 of the questions. What is Kshetra and who is the Kshetragya? So Kshetra means place, like Kurukshetra. So Kurukshetra is the place made famous by King Kuru. In this context, Arjun is asking that what is the field in which the plants or the trees of the repeated birth and death happen, or what is the field in which activities are done. So Krishna answers that this body is that Kshetra. So this body that is made of the 5 gross elements, that covers the soul, including the 3 subtle elements, that is essentially the Kshetra. And the Kshetragya is who is the knower of the field. And Krishna says that the jiva residing in the body is the Kshetragya, or the knower of the field. So Prabhupada gives the example of how a farmer is intimately aware of the field that he cultivates. So similarly, the soul is aware of the body that it inhabits. Now these 2 will be further expanded in the subsequent set of verses. Verse 3. Kshetragyam chapi mam vidhi sarva kshetreshu bharata kshetra shretagyor jnanam yattaj jnanam matam mama. O scion of Bharat, you should understand that I am also the knower in all bodies. And to understand this body and its knower is called knowledge. That is my opinion. In the previous verse, Krishna had said that the Kshetra is the body and the Kshetragya is the jiva or the soul. Here he says that I am also the Kshetragya. I am also the knower of the body. The difference is that the jiva only knows the body that it occupies. But Krishna, he knows all the body. He says, Sarva Kshetreshu Bharata. So I am the knower of all the bodies. And then Krishna also answers Arjun's third question is as to Jnanam. What is knowledge? So he says that to understand this body and its knower is knowledge. So the knowledge is to understand the Kshetra and the 2 Kshetragyas. To understand the body, to understand the jiva, and to understand the Supreme Lord and the relationship between each other. So Krishna has given a succinct explanation of Jnanam in this verse, and he will speak about it more so in verses 8 to 12. And there he will talk about the qualities that are conducive to developing this knowledge. And then towards the end of the chapter, from 27 to 35, Krishna will also speak about the application of this knowledge. Now, this verse is one of the most commented upon verse in the Bhagavad-gita, because the verse is also often used by the impersonalist to derive a different conclusion. So if you look at the first line of the verse, where Krishna says, Kshetragyam cha api mam. And so when Srila Prabhupada and the Vaishnava Acharyas interpret it, they interpret this verse as saying that I am also the knower of the body. However, if you were to interpret this in another way, that in the previous verse, Krishna had established that the jiva is the kshetragya. And in this verse he is saying, kshetragya chapi mam. That the kshetragya, which is the jiva, is me. Cha api mam. Right. So cha means also and api means certainly. Right. So this verse is also interpreted, or rather misinterpreted, as Krishna is saying that the kshetragya or the jiva that I spoke about in the last verse is also certainly me, which is essentially the Mayavadi conception, which says that the jiva is the Supreme Lord. Now, Acharyas like Vishwanath Chakravarti and Baldev Vidyabhushan, they comment extensively on it to refute this interpretation, both from a semantic perspective, just analyzing the grammar, and also from the supplemental scriptures which support the Vaishnava understanding of the verse. So Srila Prabhupada speaks briefly about it. He does not delve too much into trying to deeply analyze and refute the Mayavadi conception, other than just saying that this is the Vaishnava interpretation of it. And we will also not go down that route, because a lot of it is very technical and beyond the scope of this discussion. So in conclusion, what Krishna says in this verse is that let's say in the last two verses, is that the kshetra or the field of activities is the body. The body has two knowers, the jiva that is occupying the body, that knows only its own body, and the Supreme Lord, who is the knower of all the bodies. And understanding this is jnana. And Krishna says that this is, he says, matam mama. He says that this is my opinion. So when Krishna says this is my opinion, it is something that we have to listen to very carefully, because Krishna opinions are more than facts. So this essentially forms the basis of understanding how the material world is constructed. How does the jiva become entangled in it, and how does Krishna come to rescue us? Next verse. Verse 4. Tat kshetram yacha yadrakcha yad vikari yatascha yad sayayo yad prabhavascha tat samasena mishnu. Now please hear my brief description of this field of activity and how it is constituted, what its changes are, whence it is produced, who that knower of the field of activities is, and what his influences are. So Krishna says that tat samasena, that I will speak this in brief. because, as he will say in the next verse, that these topics are expanded in greater details in the Vedanta Sutras and other Upanishadic writings. So here he is only speaking briefly. Here also he says Mishruno, that now you Shruno is hear from me or understand from me. Previously he had said that Mammatam, that this is my opinion. So these are phrases that Krishna generally uses to signal the need for increased attention. And really speaking, because these chapters are in the category of Jnana Mishra Bhakti. So whenever there is this component of knowledge, then the need for intellectual engagement increases. In Shuddha Bhakti, it is more so from the heart. Now, of course, the devotees have all knowledge because it comes as an anga of bhakti. They don't have to pursue it separately. But here, the focus is more on Gyan. So that's why it's Gyan Mishra Bhakti. And because topics relating to knowledge tend to be complex, Krishna is signaling to Arjuna over and over again to listen attentively. So Krishna is talking about the 5 topics that he will speak more so about. Now this is in the context of the answer he gave in the previous verse about Kshetra and Kshetragya. He said the body is the Kshetra and the Kshetragya are the 2 knowers, which is the soul and the Paramatma, who is an expansion of Krishna. So essentially, he is going to be expanding on these 3 concepts of Kshetra and the 2 Kshetragyas, and he is talking about 5 aspects that he will expand on. So first is, he says, Kshetram Yacha, that what is this body constituted of? And so I will also follow Srila Prabhupada's footsteps, steal a bit of Krishna's thunder and give you a sneak preview of the answers, so that when they come in, you know the lay of the land, right? So the first, Krishna says, I will tell you what is this body constituted of, and he will explain that the body is made of the 5 gross elements, earth, water, fire, air, ether, and of the subtle elements, which is the prana, the life air, the senses, and it exhibits things like desire and hatred. So this Krishna will speak in verses 6 and 7. Then the second he says is Yad Vikari, and what are the transformations that the body goes through. And he will explain that these are in 2 categories. They are either favorable or unfavorable. And these are explained in verses 7 and 20. Then the third is, Krishna will say Yataha, how, when and where is the body produced. And it is explained that the body is essentially a combination of matter and spirit. And this is something he will speak about in the 6th verse, verses 21, 22 and 30. Then the 4th is, who is the knower of the activities? Here, Sir. And Krishna will say that the knower is the Jiva and the Paramatma in verses 14 to 18 and verse 23. And the 5th is that what is the influence of the knower? And Krishna will explain that the influence of one of the Kshetragyas is restricted to the body, which is the Jiva, and the other Kshetragya, which is the super soul or the Paramatma, extends to all the Kshetras. And this he will explain in verses 14 through 18. Okay, let's go to the next verse. Verse 5. Rishabir bahuda gitam chando bi vivide prathak Brahma sutra padeshcheva hetum madbir vinishchita. That knowledge of the field of activities and of the knower of the activities is described by various sages in various Vedic writings. It is specially presented in Vedanta Sutra with all reasoning as to cause and effect. So previously Krishna had said that he will be speaking about this in summary. So Arjun may ask that where will I get more details about it? So Krishna here then refers him to Brahma Sutra Pradesh, that he says that in the various Vedic writings, especially the Upanishads, and specifically he says the Brahma Sutras. So Srila Prabhupada writes that even though Krishna is the highest authority, he is the personality of Godhead, but as a matter of setting an example of etiquette, of giving deference to the parampara and the acharyas, Krishna is deferring to the Vedanta Sutras. So Prabhupada says Krishna is explaining this most controversial point regarding the duality and non-duality of the soul and super soul. Controversial, why? Because the impersonalists believe in the non-duality, and the Vaishnavas and the devotees, they believe in the duality. So Prabhupada says that in order to further make sure that there is no confusion about it, he is saying that not only is this something that I am saying, but also the prominent sages of the past are saying the same thing in the writings in the Upanishads and the Vedanta Sutras. So Prabhupada further writes, as far as the sages are concerned, besides himself, Vyasadeva, who is the author of Vedanta Sutra, is a great, and in the Vedanta Sutra, duality is perfectly explained. So this duality is the difference between the soul and the super soul. And Vyasadeva's father, Parashar, is also a great sage. And he writes in his book of religiosity, Aham Tvam Cha Tathanya. We, you, I, and other various other living entities are all transcendental, although in material activities. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada quotes Taittiriya Upanishad, and which is a part of Yajurveda. So Prabhupada writes this rather lengthy purport in order to drive home to us also this very important point of the duality of the soul and the super soul. So let us go over this purport in a little bit of details. So the first point Prabhupada makes is that there are different species of life that are, some of them are in the higher modes, like the devas or the humans. Some of them are in the lower modes, and this is depending on their consciousness. Now, from the lower modes to the higher modes of consciousness, the transmigration of the soul happens simply because of the process of it happens automatically. So there is no effort that is needed. So from a plant to an animal, from an animal to a higher form of animal, and to the human, that ascension happens without the descending knowledge of the Vedas. It is automatic. Now, when one reaches the human form, then there are two ways of realization. In this form, the jiva is now capable of self-realization, and there are two ways of realization. One is known as vyasati. So in the vyasati, one learns about the self and then extrapolates it to learn about the Supreme. So one may take a drop of the ocean and analyze it and then use that to determine the properties of the ocean. So this is the Vyasati system. The second, which is the indirect realization, is called the Samasti. And the Samasti is that one tries to understand the entire universe, considering it to be the body of the universe. So in this 13th chapter, or in this aspect of knowledge, Vyasati is being used, where the self is analyzing the self in order to understand the nature of the Supreme. So under Vyasati, there are 5 layers of progressive consciousness. So these are known as the Panchakoshas. The first is Anumaya. So Anumaya is the most primitive stage, where one simply exists to eat. So plants and primitive organisms, they come in this category. The second is Pranamoya, where the consciousness has advanced to the point where the entity is aware of its own active life symptoms and identifies with them. So in this case, the view of the external world is essentially unified by the principle of survival. The materialistic human society is at that stage. So Pranmaya is essentially that of either I exploit you or you will exploit me. This is the starkly materialistic aspect of the human society. That is Pranamoya. Gyanmoya is where it has further advanced the self-awareness to the point of thinking, feeling and willing. So the life is no longer driven by primordial desires to survive, but there is also introspection. Who am I? Why am I here? There is appreciation of the finer aspects of life, like music, art. So this is the more evolved, or the culturally more evolved aspects of the human society. Now these 3 koshas, the Anumaya, Pranmaya and Gyanmaya, are in the category of Kshetra. Kshetra means body. The 4th kosha is Vigyanmoya, where the self-identification is now beyond the bodily conception. So there is a distinction between the material and the spiritual aspect of one's existence. So this is the field of transcendental knowledge, which is that of the Kshetragya. So this is at the level of the spirit soul. The soul identifies itself as separate from the material body. So this is Vigyanmoya. And the 5th is Anandamoya, where there is a stage of complete bliss when one identifies oneself as the eternal servant of Krishna. This is the stage of complete self-realization, where one realizes the second Kshetragya, which is the Supreme Lord. So in summary, there are 5 koshas which is Anna. The first is Anna or food. The second is Pran or life airs. The third is mind or Gyan. The fourth is knowledge or Vigyan. And the fifth is Ananda or bliss. The first three, which is Anna, Pran and Gyan, they are completely material and they comprise the kshetra or the field of activities. The fourth, which is the Vigyanmaya Purush, is the Jivatma, that is enjoying the kshetra and is also now the knower of the kshetra. And then finally, the Anandamaya is the Supreme Lord, who is also the Kshetragya and is completely separate from it in a state of bliss. Okay, so we will stop over here and then resume our discussion in the next lecture. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai.